Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Community Conversations. This is Jonathan Weedman, and I am so pleased today to have as our very special guest, truly a legend in our community and in the healthcare industry, in the social services world, June Simmons, the founder and leader of a remarkable organization called the Partners in Care Foundation. Welcome, June. I'm honored to have you with us today. How are you doing?
It's such a delight to be here with you. This is a great adventure.
Well, thank you. Well, I've admired your work and obviously the extraordinary accomplishments of your organization over the years. Truly groundbreaking, and I think as never before, meaningful and pertinent and relevant to all of us. I'm looking forward to talking with you about that. You know, you have enjoyed such a remarkable career, June. And you've touched the lives of so many people through your work, and you've built an extraordinary institution. Let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up? And tell me about your formative years and what started you on this remarkable path.
Well, I'm a native Californian. I was born and raised in Davis, California, when it was much smaller than now. It was 13,000 people when I left it to come to LA. I was raised on a dairy farm, and so I learned a lot about the importance of treating cows and chickens well if you want them to really engage in a successful enterprise. And the importance of outside factors like weather that you can't control. So I think I was raised in a very nice way and learned love of work from my parents, and then learned strategy from my dad, who then shifted to developing the town. So it was a great background. And I came to LA I went to Occidental College for my bachelor's degree.
Wonderful. And 13,000 was the population when you were a kid. My gosh.
Isn't that shocking? Yeah.
You know, it's a remarkable, the growth of our population. When I was a kid, we always heard that the population of California was 16 million people.
Wow.
And today, I think today it's 35 million people.
40.
So our lifetimes, we've seen so much growth. It's just amazing. Gosh. Well, I know I read your biography. And by the way, your accomplishments are just, I'm looking at it, are just jaw-dropping. I mean, your honors and the recognition and the work that you've done. And I know that you worked for many years at the Huntington Hospital in Pasadena. And could you talk a little bit about that and what that was and what you learned from that experience? And also, how has the medical profession changed since you got into the biz?
Those are big questions. Well, I had a wonderful time at Huntington Hospital, and I learned about healthcare. At that time, it was mainly fee for service. And I was there as the first social worker forming their social work service. And so I learned from the patients what led them there and how they were going to be cared for when they left. And so I learned about a lot of things that didn't work in healthcare and that didn't work in our society, that got people sick and made it hard. And so, among other things, I learned at that time that people were going to nursing homes because there was no way to get care at home. And I was really driven by nursing homes are not where people want to be. And so I was really lifted and formed the senior care network there with grant funding and hospital support as a way to help people have alternatives to the nursing home and to also learn how to age well, because it turns out there's a lot we can do if we're going to have such a long life as we now enjoy, that we can enjoy it by following some of the obvious principles we were all raised with about healthy living. So it really taught me to care for people around things that happen in their lives and how to help them over a tough moment. And it taught me to think about payment and how the system and how it works and doesn't work really drives outcomes in people's lives. So I became service oriented and a change agent around payment and social policy for health issues that are impacted by what we now call social determinants of health. At that time, we didn't have a language for it, just called it, darn, that's not good, and oh, you need social work. Now we call it social determinants of health, and it's hot. It's the thing.
It's wonderful. I mean, to hear you speak about, see what I recall as a young boy, when people became elderly, and when they began to suffer from the effects of old age, it was perhaps a matter of convenience or just, the way that things were done, that people were put into an institution, into a rest home, they used to call them,
That's right.
And I had some relatives who were just sort of pro forma, just, well, it's time for them to move into the home, people used to joke about it. And the notion that you could remain at home and that you could have quality of life and better care than you'd find in an institution was probably a relatively revolutionary thing, would you say?
Yes. Yes, and very important now, because at that time, I think families were more together. They weren't as dispersed. So, but they did have a home, and the nursing home was residential, as you say. Now it's very medical. Now it's very long stay for some people. So yeah, I was very concerned. I was very concerned that one spouse would have to place their relative in the nursing home, and that would use all their resources, and that would leave both of them in a bad place and separated. So we, you know what they say, I got mad as hell and didn't want to see that anymore and started working. So I spent a lifetime looking at alternatives to those outcomes of becoming frail, staying frail, being bankrupted by frailty, and being able to have choice about where you live and how you live.
Well, it's wonderful. And when you talk about getting older and living longer lives, one of my podcast interviews was recently with the actor William Shatner.
Oh, yes.
who is now 90 years old and just flew in the spaceship up above the in the space, and he's going strong at 90, where most people at 90 were in rest homes, and he'll be very pleased. I'm pleased that he will be in such distinguished company as you, as my podcast. You should be very proud. Bill will be very proud of that. I wanted to also ask you, what sparked your interest, and maybe you've already kind of answered this, but back in 1997, in developing home meds, Partners evidence-based home medication inventory and decision support. That was a question that one of your colleagues thought I should ask you, because that's where it all started, correct? Would that be fair to say?
Well, that's a very critical piece of success in helping people age well and stay independent at home. Well, I was at that time leading the Visiting Nurse Association of Los Angeles. And so that was a whole workforce of several thousand people. They had 5,000 people under care at home on any given day. So they went to the home and they saw what people were up against, and they gathered the meds. We didn't have computers for healthcare at that time. And so gathering the meds didn't do much good. And so we sought philanthropic funding from the John A. Hartford Foundation and worked with Vanderbilt and built a system where a computer would take what a person had gathered in the home and tell us, was it a problem or not? Because the prescriber doesn't often know really what meds people are taking, especially if they leave the hospital, they go home, they have the old meds, they have the new meds, then they have herbals, over the counters, all kinds of things, the dog's meds, the neighbor's meds. Millie, try this yellow pill. It'll really make you feel better.
Yeah.
So turns out medications are essential for cure and managing discomfort, and totally dangerous, and can kill people and can make them look like they're not smart anymore, put them at risk of falling. So meds, it turns out, in this day of measurement, when we have a lot more research, are a #1 driver of how people look and do. So say you have a hospitalization, you go home, medications get mixed up, misunderstood and improperly taken through lack of knowledge. It drives a huge failure rate. People suffer. They end up back in the ER in the hospital. So it's both humanly expensive, because that's a bad experience, no good for anybody. And it's extremely costly. Call the ambulance, go to the ER, stay in the hospital, very expensive. So we took it as a reformer, as a point we like to find, where there's a large problem, a lot of human suffering, and a high cost that could be avoided by doing a better job. That's kind of our sweet spot, where we look at how could we achieve change in massive systems as a smaller player. So, so medications is a #1 tool for mercy for people and mercy for the healthcare dollar.
You know, I must, as an aside, tell you that several months ago, I was taking some codeine cough syrup, and then my doctor had prescribed a couple of medications. I can't remember what they were for exactly. And when I went to the pharmacist, pharmacist came out and said, "I need to talk to you about these pills, because if you take them together, and you're also taking this medication, you could die." And I said, "Oh, you're putting me on." He said, "No. The combination of these pills, while it's rare, could have very catastrophic effects." And I thought, oh my God, I'm glad somebody was paying attention. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Well, thank you. I wanted to also ask you, you're chairing a national committee that is working towards the identification of one or more pathways to address gaps in the current system of community-based organizations and healthcare providers, to better meet the needs of vulnerable populations. Why would this be important to the average person in Los Angeles, to our listeners?
Yeah, it's important to us, as it's important all across the country. We have some very old research that wasn't really taking hold in people's hearts. The pandemic really brought it. The pandemic really stripped a veil away from problems we sort of knew we had, but weren't clear, around racism, around health disparities, around the impact of poverty. Although most of the issues we deal with are actually universal, they're issues for you and me, and they're issues for more underserved and challenged populations. So the old research says at least 55% of our health outcomes are not coming from medical care. 10% of the cure comes from medical care, but 90% of America health dollars go into, into healthcare and not into the other huge contributor to outcomes. So there's now a very active look at how do we address social determinants of health. We have a whole infrastructure for that. We have all the not-for-profits, we have all the community-based organizations, CBOs, that we have Meals on Wheels, we have transportation, we have all kinds of ways of helping people with basic problems that they face, but we don't have a way of paying for that. We pay for fixing healthcare problems after they occur, rather than moving upstream and preventing them, like with the meds. We'll prescribe the meds and then the pharmacist will go, wait, don't do that. That's harmful. So we have 5 major national health plans that are working together. And some folks from government leadership that are interested and supportive, and we have some key not-for-profit leaders like myself, we have had to organize the community delivery system. You know how not-for-profits, we're all out there, 65,000, as you like to say, in LA County. Like healthcare used to be, very fragmented. Now, healthcare, when you go to your plan, your doctor's in a network. They're organized into a delivery system, and it's paid for through your health insurance. We're trying to parallel that with community solutions. So we have organized home and community-based services, networks of care. So there's one not-for-profit in our case here. We serve this function. We get a contract with a healthcare plan. And then we organize other nonprofits to deliver the care because they're local. They really are trusted. They know what they're doing in their neighborhood. They understand their population. So they're the right people to give services, but they need to be pulled together. So we're working with these 5 national health plans like United, Humana, CVS, Aetna, Anthem, Centene. These groups are going to do what we have recommended for quite a while, co-design the new delivery system that aligns what we call social care, the community part, and healthcare, so that the money is wisely allocated across the best investments to get the best health outcomes for people. So we should care in LA because we would like to have whole person care. That's what this is trying to move towards. Of course, it's a disruptive change. This is like not what we've been doing. We're probably moving someone's cheese, so that could be irritating. But it's a transformation that seems to be now on fire. It's everywhere we go, we're hearing all about it. So I was really thrilled to be asked to co-chair this very promising new partnership for major health plans and major community groups and government to jointly plan how to create a sustainable, consistent, more formal community system of care to keep us at home, to help people succeed in managing their health.
I
That
love
makes
it.
sense. I don't know if that's clear enough.
It absolutely makes sense. And, you know, I think healthcare has been an issue that has been confusing and confounding for so many in our country. And it's something that I think is an issue or so it's not particularly glamorous or exciting, but by God, you sure pay attention when you need it. And then suddenly you find yourself at a crossroads where your healthcare and your diagnosis and your medical care really, really matters. And, you know, I turned 62 years old this year, so I'm still quite young. I think.
Indeed.
But what are the things that as I get older, should I be thinking about, June, regarding my future good health, our listeners' future good health? I think, as I said, there's a lot of confusion around healthcare, around its cost and its access and things like that. I've stopped doing all the bad things. I'm exercising. I'm getting regular care. But, you know, I hope to have a nice long path for a few more decades. So what is somebody like me in my situation we should be thinking about right now?
Yeah, well, it is very important. As you say, we're starting to learn, you know, although we're aging our whole life. The day you're born, you're aging. If you're lucky, you age a long, long time. So certainly diet is crucial. Physical activity is one of the number one drivers. So like everything else, we say Goldilocks is the right zone. So you don't want to do so much that you ruin yourself, or so little that you ruin yourself. So finding a healthy balance around nutrition, around maintaining a decent weight, around physical strength and balance, around social connectedness, which is one of them we've discovered recently, and I feel confident that you are strong on connectedness and avoiding what we found a lot of, especially through the pandemic, loneliness and social isolation. Powerful new discovery that this really impacts health. And mental health, of course. So I think one thing is healthy behaviors, nutrition, meds management, frequent, appropriately timed early conversations with medical care to keep you well, not wait till 911 and then go, oh, now what do I do? Physical activity, very, very important. And then attending to what we now see, a pandemic of mental health issues. And now we see a wonderful distribution of virtual solutions for these that are really helpful for people. So looking at being technologically connected and being able to really stay in touch with people and also to get help, not just calling for a ride or having groceries delivered to your home or anything else, but to get mental health services, to even get medical services without having to go there. So we are viewing technology as a new utility and we have a big divide, a digital divide. And so there's an effort now, I think, to build broadband and then make sure that people can actually have a device like we have now. We can see each other, we can hear each other, and we can be engaged in the world. So a lot of things can be done, but your walking is right on point.
Indeed.
Fundamental. Keep doing it.
I am.
No wonder you look so good.
You're very kind. We have lots of filters on me today. No, seriously, for all the tragedy and loss of COVID, what you said a moment ago, it really has caused an appraisal of so much in our lives. And you mentioned the technology and how that has come into play in ways that it never had before. And I think it's caused everybody to really reassess where they're at and what really matters. And I got to tell you, health is at the top of the list.
It is.
And if anybody doesn't believe that, you get that sciatica I had 2 years ago where I could barely walk. Let me tell you, I love it all. Well, I want to just pivot for a second, ask you a few questions. During the last 20 years, philanthropy in Los Angeles has evolved, it's changed, and it continues to do so. We've seen the exodus of a lot of major corporations. We've seen foundations guidelines, narrowing or always changing. And, as I mentioned, we've got over 60,000 nonprofits out there, who are doing good work, but who are struggling in many respects, particularly now during COVID. Well, what thoughts or guidance or direction might you give to that executive director or that development director who are going through what they are right now from your perspective and your experience?
Well, I think we're starting to view philanthropy as an investment, if you will, a social investment. I think the foundations are starting to look at how they give and think more about, like the Weingart Foundation now gives, core operating. And foundations are starting to think about whether nonprofits actually have an indirect, an administrative cost. They did not used to think about that, or they said it. They say, 10%, which most agencies can't run at a 10% administrative cost. So having the philanthropy world transform itself in very thoughtful ways, giving longer, bigger grants to buy a bigger change, I think is very, very useful. And on the not-for-profit side, to think, how is this going to build a sustainable long-term safety net improvement? Sustainability means, how is this going to get mainstreamed so it actually will survive? We don't want to run from innovation to innovation, do this and stop. We want these to be rivers of change that that flow to a good place and have lasting value in our community. So it's a kind of a change on both sides. A lot of what we're doing now is getting foundation dollars and individual donations, which of course we have massive wealth in our community now. So hopefully individuals buy in, are working to build new ways, as we talked about, for the medical dollars to come across to the social service side. Now that we know that social services are more than half of the solution, looking at reallocating societal dollars into more formal, long-lasting arrangements so the not-for-profit sector isn't so dependent on come and go money. I know a lot were devastated by the pandemic, partly because they just couldn't do their work. And then some, like food meals, were like just demanded. We had a lot of people who were isolated and alone that we were helping. So we actually grew during this pandemic, during the shutdown. So I think it's like you say, everything's being rethought. Everyone's looking at really what's meaningful, what is lasting, what is the top priority to be concerned about in order to make this world viable and a happy place. And as you say, health, keeping your health and tending to it quickly. I like to say to our staff, they say, oh, I have X, Y. You get 3 days. If it isn't gone, get help. Don't let things, because otherwise things get worse. Things are always either getting better or getting worse, you know? So we have to be on the better side.
You sound like a great boss. I should send you my resume. I had a boss once who said to me, if it ain't broke, break it. And I've always kind of liked that advice, right? Always rethink and recalibrate. And I always love to ask folks about leadership. I've had some great bosses in my career, June, and I've had some bosses probably ought to be in jail. And if you're listening, you better hope you don't get caught. How would you describe your leadership style? What, in your estimation, because you've managed a large organization, I'm sure thousands of people in your career, as a boss, as a mentor, what in your estimation makes a great leader?
Well, I guess the same thing that I recommend for our staff, which is do the work of your heart, do the work you couldn't bear not to do if they have lucky, and that now it's a job, someone's paying you for it. I have found that the joy of following mission purpose in your work is really important, and we're hearing that in this or in this phase of the pandemic, that's what people are looking for, and some degree of flexibility. So I like to trade on people's strengths. That is what'll make an organization thrive. You've met our development officer here, Karen Schneider. She's on fire about her work, so I need to cooperate with her and give her room to make the success that only she can do. We can't do the other jobs. So we want really to create a culture that's based on respect and appreciation. And I bet no one here would say that it's not also based on looking to what's going to really get the job done, which sometimes is pretty demanding. So we do kind of work our buns off here, but hopefully with a joy about the purpose and about the human community we're trying to create here, where we don't speak ill about each other. We bring any differences together, talk directly in order to benefit from them. And we work for innovation. We like to say, today's a great solution to yesterday's problems. So now what do we need to fix? So to be open and really collaborative, I think, to share the process.
I love it. I love it. Well, Now I'm definitely sending you my resume. I mean, I love hearing that because that really is what leadership is about collaboration, about being supportive. And what I always have loved about working with the nonprofit community, most especially, is that they're individuals who've chosen with their lives to do something to improve the human condition. Now, that's not to detract from bankers or salespeople or other folks who earn a living in different ways, but nonprofit people are special, and you must work really hard, and I'm sure you put in long hours, and you're in high demand, and there's never enough hours in the day, I would imagine. But what does June Simmons do for fun? How do you recreate? How do you recharge your batteries? And let me ask you, what do you love about our city? I grew up here, and I always like to ask those questions. So what do you do for fun?
Well, for fun, I play a little tennis. I play a little music. I have a pianist come once a week to sight read. I play the flute. And I garden. But what I love about the city are the arts. I particularly love the Hollywood Bowl. I'm passionate about the musicals. So I have a series, and thank God I went back and to a real live musical theater event this last week. It was so exciting to be back
Awesome.
in the theater. It was so great to have the bowl back. I love the music festival in Aspen, Colorado, and I'm wild about the Rose Parade as a way to start the new year. You live near there, so you don't probably need to come, but I have front row seats that I finally found. I love great seats with easy parking. So I have great seats for theater, for Rose Bowl, for the Hollywood Bowl. I have a box. And so I love that music, and the human creative spirit to me is a fantastic lift. Just gives us perspective on everything.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I served on the board of the Los Angeles Philharmonic for 17 years. And of course, we go to the Walt Disney, and we go to the Bowl. And I was telling a friend the other day, it's a rather inelegant analogy, but it's sort of like my dialysis. I feel that I've been restored by those experiences. And I think that's wonderful. Well, let me just ask you, June, as we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to share? Any last thoughts or comments for our listeners that you'd like to impart? And let me just thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with me. I hope it's the first of more. I'm putting together a pretty special group of individuals, and I'm just honored that you are among them.
I really appreciate this opportunity. Well, I think we just need to work together, like the health plans and the community-based organizations, like the local community organizations that come together. They're better together than apart, because the moment is now. We have crystal clear understanding of some of the pain points that are ruining lives, and they are what we call modifiable risk factors that we can address and get better results. So I think if we all try to grasp those together and be ready for some basic change, that we just really can make such a difference for all of us. We all win from these kinds of changes. And so your leadership with this programming, I think, is beautiful and appreciated.
Well, that's very high praise. Thank you so much, June, and thank you so much for being a part of the community conversation. And I know we've got a lunch appointment on the books. I can't wait to see you in the flesh. It's been too long, and so every good wish, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was great. Take care.
Thank you.